I would appraise this book actually at about $40,000.
Let me tell you, you are lucky.
You probably saved my job.
Well, you can thank me with some chocolate or something.
Picture this. You're watching Pawn Stars, and suddenly this calm, brilliant woman walks in and tells someone their precious book is worth $40,000. Then, just like that, she disappears from the show forever. No explanation. No goodbye. Just gone. What happened to Rebecca Romney, the book expert who seemed to have it all figured out? Today, we're diving deep into one of reality TV's most mysterious disappearances. We're talking about stolen books, FBI investigations, and secrets that the History Channel never wanted you to know. This story has everything. Family connections of famous politicians, forgeries worth millions, and a woman who went from small-town Arizona to most exclusive rare book circles in America. But first, let me tell you something that might shock you. Rebecca Romney never planned to work with old books. In fact, she once thought they were boring relics that only old men cared about. So how did she end up becoming one of the most trusted voices in the rare book world? And why did she suddenly vanish from our TV screens right when she was at the peak of her fame? Let's start from the beginning. Rebecca was born in Phoenix, Arizona, back in 1985, growing up in the desert heat. She had big dreams that had nothing to do with dusty old books or pawn shops. She wanted to be a philosopher or maybe translate ancient texts. She was the kind of kid who loved deep conversations and big ideas. When she turned 18, Rebecca headed off to college thinking she'd spend her life in quiet classrooms, maybe teaching students about ancient Greek or debating the meaning of life. Little did she know that her love for languages would become her superpower in a completely different world. At Brigham Young University, Rebecca threw herself into studying like her life depended on it. We're talking 12 hours a day of pure studying. She mastered 5.5 languages: English, French, Japanese, Latin, ancient Greek, and even some Old English that most people can barely read. Her professors were amazed when she translated a piece of ancient Greek writing from 300 BC for an exam and got every single word right. Between 2003 and 2007, while her friends were picking safe, easy majors, Rebecca was spending 4 hours in philosophy seminars arguing about free will and decoding texts that were older than entire civilizations. She graduated with perfect grades and wrote a thesis comparing ancient Greek fragments of Plato's Republic. Nobody knew it then, but all this weird mix of philosophy and ancient languages was preparing her for something incredible. Then came the mistake that changed everything. In 2007, fresh out of college, Rebecca saw a job posting for what she thought was a basic management position at a bookstore in Philadelphia. She showed up for the interview and realized she had completely misunderstood what the job was about. It wasn't for a regular bookstore. It was for Bowman Rare Books, and they wanted a rare book specialist, someone who could handle books worth more than most people's houses. Rebecca almost walked out of that interview. She had zero experience with rare books, but something made her stay. She told them the truth, that she knew nothing about rare books but was willing to learn. Her language skills caught their attention, and somehow they hired her anyway. Within months, Rebecca was handling books that most people only see in museums. We're talking about Shakespeare folios from 1623, pages from the famous Gutenberg Bible, and first editions of Isaac Newton's groundbreaking work on physics. One mistake could cost more money than most people make in a year, but Rebecca didn't just survive, she thrived. By 2010, when she was only 26 years old, she got promoted to gallery manager in Las Vegas. 3 years later, at 29, she became the youngest senior director in the company's history. She was now in charge of catalogs, auctions, and private sales worth over $10 million every single year. One of her clients once paid $300,000 for a book printed in 1472. But Rebecca wasn't just good at selling expensive books. She was becoming a master at spotting fake ones. Now here's where the story gets really interesting. Rick Harrison, the owner of Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, didn't find Rebecca through some TV casting call. He already knew her. You see, when Bowman Rare Books opened their Las Vegas location in 2007, Rebecca was part of that team. By 2010, she was running the whole operation. Rick had been running his pawn shop since 1989, and in a city like Las Vegas, the world of rare books and antiques isn't that big. Rick and Rebecca kept running into each other at local events and through mutual friends. They both loved history, and Rick could see that Rebecca really knew her stuff when it came to old documents and books. So when Rick needed someone who could tell the difference between a real historical document and a fake one, he didn't ask the TV producers to find someone. He just picked up the phone and called Rebecca directly. That phone call led to her first appearance on Pawn Stars in 2011, not as some hired TV personality, but as someone Rick already trusted. Their friendship grew beyond just a show. They even went on double dates together. Fans watching at home had no idea that the calm, smart book expert they were seeing wasn't just a good fit for TV. She was handpicked by Rick himself because he trusted her judgment. When Rebecca stepped in front of the cameras for the first time on April 4th, 2011, she was handed a stack of Civil War-era papers. Among them was a Confederate bond from 1861 that could be worth $5,000 if it was real. Rebecca examined everything, the paper texture, the ink, even the way it had been printed. In less than 10 minutes, she spotted a forged signature that dropped the value from $10,000 to just a few $100. Viewers were glued to their screens. Rebecca spoke with such confidence, quietly double-checking details while the cameras rolled. She never got flustered or excited like some of the other experts. She just calmly explained what she was seeing. By the end of that episode, she wasn't just another guest expert. She had become the book lady, and fans loved her. The ratings jumped by 15% after that first episode. From that point on, whenever the pawn shop got anything made of paper, books, letters, historical documents, Rebecca was the person they called. Between 2011 and 2014, Rebecca appeared in around 30 episodes, and those were some of her busiest years on the show. She looked at everything from a $2,000 replica of a 1493 Columbus letter to an original copy of the Declaration of Independence worth $15,000. In 2013, she absolutely stunned everyone by finding notes connected to Edgar Allan Poe hidden inside a manuscript that everyone thought was worthless. She even had to handle disturbing historical documents like 19th century slave trade papers and explain how you put a price on something so deeply connected to human suffering. By 2014, Rebecca was doing almost 3/4 of all the paper-related appraisals on the show. Some of her decisions were really tough. She once had to tell someone that their Shakespeare folio, which they believed was worth $10,000, was completely fake. That's never an easy conversation to have. What made Rebecca special wasn't just what she knew, it was how she delivered the news. She never raised her voice or looked stressed out. She could drop a bombshell like revealing that a $50,000 book was part of a forgery ring from the 1800s and still sound like she was calmly explaining what she had for lunch that day. While other experts on the show made a big production out of their excitement, Rebecca kept everything steady and clear. That became her trademark style, and fans absolutely loved it. There was this one time in 2012 when Chumley almost lost his job over a book he bought without checking with anyone first. He paid $500 for a signed copy of Charles Lindbergh's 1927 autobiography, but then accidentally called him Mark Lindbergh instead of Charles. Everyone in the shop thought the signature was fake, and Rick even said that if it didn't check out, Chumley's next day off would be permanent, meaning he'd be fired. Rebecca stepped in to save the day. She pulled out a verified copy of Lindbergh's signature and compared them side by side. She pointed out how Lindbergh had changed his signature style as he became more famous over the years. It turned out the signature was completely real, and she valued the book at $1,500, triple what Chumley had paid for it. Not only was it a solid profit for the shop, but Rebecca had literally saved Chumley's job with her expertise. Another time, someone came in with what looked like Revolutionary War bonds, claiming they were worth a fortune. But when Rebecca took a closer look, the truth was much stranger and more complicated. These weren't Revolutionary War bonds at all. They were Confederate bonds, and they weren't just rare, they were missing. These documents had disappeared after the Civil War ended in 1865. They were connected to stolen Southern assets that had been loaded onto a ship called the USS Republic, which sank in a hurricane that same year. The wreck was discovered in 2003, and by 2005, some of its corroded contents had been recovered. These bonds were part of that underwater treasure, potentially worth $50,000, but they also came with serious legal problems. You see, selling stolen items could land a pawn shop in court, so the police got involved. Rebecca's careful research kept the shop from buying something that might have turned into an expensive lawsuit. It proved that sometimes historical artifacts come with dangerous consequences that most people never think about. Then there was a time someone thought they'd hit the absolute jackpot with a Shakespeare First Folio from 1623. Real copies of that book have sold for millions of dollars. One even sold for almost $10 million in 2020. The seller's copy looked impressive at first glance, but when Rebecca examined it closely, the problems started to show. The paper didn't look like it had aged properly. The ink looked too clean and fresh. It was missing the tiny flaws and imperfections that real 400-year-old books always have. She determined it was a fake, possibly inspired by something called a false folio of 1619, which was a misleading collection made by two men named William Jaggard and Thomas Pavier. Even those false folios are valuable to collectors, but this particular book wasn't even close to being authentic. If Rick had bought it, the shop could have lost thousands and thousands of dollars. Rebecca's sharp eyes and deep knowledge saved them from making one of the most expensive mistakes in Pawn Stars history. But sometimes the items that came into the shop were as real as they could possibly be, and just as historically important. That's what happened when someone brought in a first edition of On the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. This book came out on November 24th, 1859, and it sold out completely on its very first day. Only 250 copies were printed in that first run. Rebecca took one look at the green cloth binding, the diagrams inside, and the advertisements dated June 1859, and she knew immediately that it was authentic. She valued it at $75,000, and she wasn't being generous. The impact of Darwin's book on the world couldn't be overstated. It completely reshaped both science and religion forever. Some copies, especially those with Darwin's personal notes written in the margins, have sold for over $500,000. Later editions of the same book aren't nearly as valuable. For example, the 1862 edition, where Darwin removed a strange story about whale bears, is only worth around $9,500. But that first printing from 1859 changed everything we thought we knew about life on Earth, and finding one sitting in a Las Vegas pawn shop was a kind of discovery that most collectors only dream about. Between 2011 and 2015, Rebecca became a true fan favorite, especially after she evaluated a first edition of Frankenstein in an episode that lit up online discussion forums. That book was worth $20,000, and the reaction from viewers was worth just as much. People started calling her the Book Whisperer, and she quickly gained tens of thousands of followers on social media. Viewers constantly begged the producers to give her more screen time. Some fans even asked for a spin-off show just featuring Rebecca and her rare book adventures. But not everything was perfect behind the scenes, and that's where our story takes a dark turn. In 2014, an episode of Pawn Stars aired that would quietly trigger one of the show's strangest and most disturbing controversies. A man walked into the gold and silver pawn shop, claiming to have a rare 1841 edition of the Book of Mormon. Rebecca examined it carefully and estimated its value at $40,000, but the seller wanted $100,000 for it. After some back-and-forth negotiating, Rick managed to buy it for $24,000. On the surface, it looked like just another good deal for the shop, the kind of thing that happened in every episode. But then things started to fall apart in ways that nobody could have predicted. Whispers began to spread that the book was actually stolen from the Marriott Library at the University of Utah. Not long after the episode aired, federal agents allegedly stepped in. According to these rumors, the FBI seized the book and left the pawn shop with absolutely nothing. There was never an official statement from anyone involved, and no charges were made public. But the story gained serious momentum through online forums and social media. In late 2014, around the same time the FBI supposedly got involved, Rebecca was said to have been questioned by federal agents, according to the whispers circulating online. The agents wanted to understand how stolen historical books could make it on national television without anyone raising red flags. This wasn't some isolated incident in the rare book world. In 2015, the FBI had already returned stolen books to the National Library of Sweden. Earlier, in 2005 and 2006, they had arrested a man named Forbes Smiley, who had stolen millions of dollars worth of rare maps from libraries and universities. Rebecca was never accused of any wrongdoing, but some people believe the questioning deeply affected her. She had built her reputation on confidently appraising books worth thousands of dollars. Now, suddenly, her judgment was under a shadow of suspicion. Then came January 10, 2015. Rebecca appeared on what would turn out to be her final Pawn Stars episode, where she appraised a pirate book from 1734. She said it was worth $1,000, but Rick, as always, bargained the price down to $400. It seemed like just another normal episode. But just like that, she was gone. After 4 years on the show and nearly 20 episodes, there was no goodbye scene, no farewell message, nothing. The History Channel didn't explain her absence. Online forums exploded with questions and theories. Had she been fired? Was it related to the Book of Mormon scandal? Some people even believed she had left after experiencing some kind of personal tragedy. Others pointed to the show's growing criticism and accusations of fake appraisals, stage deals, and behind-the-scenes conflicts between cast members. But fans noticed something really odd. Even though Rebecca had completely vanished from the show, she never removed Pawn Stars from her LinkedIn profile. To this day, she still lists herself as their rare book expert from 2011 to the present. Some people believe it's just smart marketing to keep her name connected to the show. Others think it might be part of a legal agreement that prevents her from talking about what really happened. Either way, it keeps her linked to a show she hasn't regularly appeared on in years, which only adds to the mystery. In 2016, Rebecca moved to Philadelphia. Officially, it was for a career promotion. She left the Las Vegas gallery behind and became senior director at Bowman Rare Books, handling library acquisitions and catalogs. She later worked in Brooklyn and eventually settled in Washington, D.C., where she started her own rare book company. So yes, there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for her departure from the show, but the timing still raised a lot of eyebrows. Why did the move happen just months after the Book of Mormon scandal? Was it really just career growth? Or was something else going on behind closed doors that we'll never know about? In 2016, Rebecca married a man who shared her love for books. His name was J.P. Romney, and he was an author and historical researcher. What made this marriage even more interesting was that J.P. had family connections to one of the biggest names in American politics. He was distantly related to Mitt Romney, the man who ran for president in 2012 and came very close to winning. Through this marriage, Rebecca found herself loosely connected to a political dynasty that included George Romney, who was the governor of Michigan from 1963 to 1969. But despite all these connections, Rebecca has never actually met Mitt Romney. The family connection was real but distant, more about sharing a name than having any actual relationship. At the time of her marriage, Rebecca's fame from Pawn Stars was still fresh in people's minds. She had been on the show from 2011 to 2015, and fans remember her appraising incredible items like a rare 1507 map worth $1 million. But by 2023, the marriage had ended. JP was now her ex-husband, and fans began wondering whether politics had ever played any role in Rebecca's journey through the entertainment world. Rebecca, however, has always insisted that her path in the rare book world was entirely her own choice and had nothing to do with family connections or political influences. The year after her marriage, Rebecca and JP worked together on a book that surprised everyone in the literary world. Printer's Error, Irreverent Stories from Book History, was published on March 14, 2017. This wasn't just some light, easy read. Across 368 pages, the book uncovered strange, forgotten moments from the history of printing and publishing. The book included stories about forged copies of Galileo's scientific work, Charles Dickens's legal battle for copyright protection in the 1840s, and even the mystery behind the famous Gutenberg Bible, which was printed in 1455, but never actually mentioned Gutenberg's name anywhere in the book. Only 48 copies of that Bible still exist today, and each one is worth tens of millions of dollars. The book mixed Rebecca's real-world expertise with JP's storytelling abilities, and the combination worked beautifully. Critics praised it, sales were strong, and it gave Rebecca something that very few reality TV stars ever managed to achieve, a respected voice in academic and literary circles that went far beyond her television fame. That same year, people still remember Rebecca for her incredible 2013 Pawn Stars appraisal of a $100,000 Shakespeare folio, and JP had just published his own novel called The Monster on the Road Is Me. Together, their collaborative book project marked a creative high point in their relationship, but also turned out to be one of their last major public collaborations before their marriage ended. Despite all the public curiosity about her marriage and its political connections, Rebecca has always drawn a very firm line when it comes to discussing her personal life. She almost never speaks publicly about the Romney family name or her connection to it. In a 2023 interview, she said very plainly that she had never even met Mitt Romney, despite being technically related to him through marriage. The distance, both personal and professional, couldn't be any clearer. Rebecca has 2 children, but she keeps their names and ages completely private. While she continues to use the Romney name professionally, fans have noticed how little she's willing to say about her personal relationships or family connections. Rebecca didn't just leave reality TV behind. She left it with a very clear plan for her future. In 2019, after years of being known primarily for Pawn Stars, she co-founded a rare book company called Type Punch Matrix in Silver Spring, Maryland. This wasn't just some cute little antique shop tucked away in a corner somewhere. It was a bold statement about where the rare book industry was headed. Working alongside her business partner Brian Cassidy, Rebecca built a company that broke every traditional rule in the antiquarian book world. Their inventory wasn't just expensive, it was revolutionary. They dealt in Shakespeare folios, leaves from Gutenberg Bibles, and titles that weren't just rare, but historically radical and groundbreaking. Within just 1 year of opening, they were selling to elite clients and moving pieces worth hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars. In a field that had traditionally been dominated by older men, Rebecca stood out as someone who was sharp, vocal, and completely unafraid to challenge the established ways of doing business. But her rebellion against the traditional rare book world had started even earlier than that. In 2017, she and a colleague named Heather O'Donnell created something called a Honey and Wax Book Collecting Prize. This was a $1,000 prize awarded every year to women under 30 who had put together the most original and surprising book collections. The prize judges didn't care how much money the books had cost or how famous the authors were. They cared about how much the collection meant to the person who had assembled it and how creative and original their approach was. A tattoo artist won the prize in 2023 with a collection focused on hybrid botanical works. A national security analyst won in 2024 with a military-themed collection. Rebecca had noticed something deeply troubling in the book collecting world. Women were just as passionate about collecting rare books as men were, but they were hesitant to call themselves collectors or to take their own expertise seriously. This prize was designed to change that mindset completely. Backed by major companies like Biblio and Christie's Auction House, the prize gave young women visibility, confidence, and a real place in the traditionally male-dominated rare book world. By 2025, the prize had honored 9 different women and inspired countless more to take their collecting seriously. That same year, Rebecca released a book that sent shockwaves through the literary world. Jane Austen's Bookshelf came out on February 18, 2025. It wasn't just another academic book about literature. It was what Rebecca called an investigation into the Great Forgetting, the systematic way that women writers who had shaped Jane Austen's world had been completely erased from literary history. Rebecca revealed that writers like Frances Burney and Radcliffe and Charlotte Smith had once been best-selling authors with print runs in the thousands. These women were household names in their time, but now most of their work is completely out of print and forgotten. Rebecca dug deep into numbers and showed that only 10 to 15% of 18th century novels written by women survive today, compared to 40% of novels written by men. She didn't just identify the problem. She provided concrete proof. book by book and number by number. Readers and critics were amazed by her research. The New York Times called the book sharp and fearless. The Washington Post said it was thrilling. The Guardian called it instinctive and electric. In just a few weeks after publication, the book sold over 20,000 copies. What shocked people most was Rebecca's honest admission that she herself hadn't heard of most of the women writers she was writing about. Not during her philosophy degree at college, not even during her years working as a rare book dealer. She had read all the famous male authors like Richardson and Fielding, but she had never read Charlotte Lennox or Maria Edgeworth, even though Jane Austen definitely had read them and been influenced by their work. That realization hit Rebecca really hard. Her entire education had quietly erased these women's voices from history, and she had never even noticed it was happening. If someone like her, with all her expertise and education, hadn't seen this pattern, how many other people had missed it too? So Rebecca started collecting these forgotten books herself. In 2015, she began searching for original editions by the women who had shaped Jane Austen's writing. Books like Frances Burney Evelina from 1778 and Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho from 1794 and Charlotte Smith's Emmeline from 1788. These books weren't easy to find. Many have been lost or dismissed as sentimental or frivolous, simply because they were written by women. Rebecca flew to auctions around the country, hunted through estate sales, and once got into a bidding war for a 1759 copy of The Female Quixote by Charlotte Lennox. By 2025, Rebecca's personal collection had grown over 50 rare books, and each one represented a resurrection of a forgotten voice. But she didn't just stop at collecting these books for herself. She used them as evidence in her research. She tracked how many copies had been printed originally, how many had survived to the present day, and how critics and scholars had treated them over the centuries. What she found was disturbing. Women's books were far less likely to be preserved, reprinted, or taught in schools, even when they had been hugely influential. And Radcliffe had helped inspire Edgar Allan Poe, Mary Shelley, and the entire Gothic literary tradition, but her work had been left out of the official literary canon. Frances Burney had sold 3,000 copies of her novel in the 18th century, but had completely disappeared from public awareness by 1850. Charlotte Smith's poetry had helped shape William Wordsworth's entire career, but she had faded into almost complete silence. Rebecca used these patterns to show how sexism wasn't just present in book reviews and criticism. It was actually built into survival of literature itself. Rebecca's story shows us something incredible about second chances and reinvention. Her journey didn't begin in some dusty old library surrounded by ancient books. It began under the bright neon lights of a Las Vegas pawn shop, where she first appeared as a rare book expert on television. But somehow, that unlikely beginning eventually took her into the most exclusive and respected rooms in American book collecting. One of those exclusive places is the Grolier Club in New York City. Founded way back in 1884, it's the oldest and most elite society of book collectors in the entire country. Only 825 people in the whole world can call themselves members of this exclusive club. And yet, in May 2025, Rebecca was invited there to deliver a lecture titled Jane Austen's Bookshelf, Collecting as Investigation. That lecture began with a single moment in 2023 when Rebecca stumbled across a Victorian edition of Evelina by Frances Burney in a used bookstore. That one book changed the entire direction of her research and led her down a path of uncovering the women who had once inspired Jane Austen, but who had been mostly erased from literary history. Rebecca isn't just telling the story of literary history. She's actively rewriting it and forcing people to confront uncomfortable truths about how women's contributions have been systematically ignored and forgotten. Since 2015, Rebecca has also been teaching at the Antiquarian Book Seminars, where every year more than 100 aspiring rare book dealers gather to learn from experts in the field. She tells them truths that most people in the business never hear about. She speaks openly about scandals like the Thomas J. Wise forgeries of the 1930s, which involved more than 50 fake first editions that fooled expert collectors for decades. She shows her students that collecting isn't just about owning valuable objects. It's about uncovering hidden stories and forgotten voices. Her lessons go much deeper than just determining market value. They reveal the hidden fingerprints of authors who've been erased from history. Rebecca is also revolutionizing how rare books are authenticated and verified. In 2019, when she co-founded Type Punch Matrix, it wasn't just another traditional book-selling firm. By 2023, she was using artificial intelligence and blockchain technology to authenticate the ownership history of rare books and manuscripts. One test case involved a $50,000 Sylvia Plath manuscript, and her software could trace its ownership all the way back to 1956 with complete accuracy. This technological leap wasn't accidental. It grew directly out of frauds and forgeries that she had exposed in her 2017 book, Printer's Error, which dove deep into the history of forged books like the fake Gutenberg Bibles that appeared in the 1840s. By 2022, Rebecca was working with technology companies to build authentication tools that most collectors could only dream of having access to. These included spectral ink scanners that can detect forgeries with 95% accuracy, catching fakes that even expert human eyes would miss completely. In 2024, one of these high-tech tools helped uncover a forged Columbus letter supposedly from 1493. But Rebecca didn't keep these amazing tools locked away for her own use. She brought them directly into her teaching seminars. Over 200 rare book dealers learned how to use this technology in just the past year alone. Techniques that were once confined to institutions like the Smithsonian Museum were suddenly available to anyone who wanted to learn. Rebecca even started working on virtual reality simulations that allow people to handle extremely rare books digitally without ever risking damage to the real thing. It's not just about preservation. It's about completely transforming how people can access and study these incredible historical artifacts. But Rebecca's ambitions didn't stop there. By 2025, she was expanding Type Punch Matrix into museum consulting. What started as a humble $100,000 startup in 2019 had grown into a company that had appraised over 1,000 rare items worth more than $10 million combined. One of those appraisals was for a 16th century manuscript that was displayed at the Boston Book Fair in 2023. Another was a lightning-fast sale in 2022 when she helped the Lilly Library acquire 2,000 romance novels for $250,000 in just 16 hours, setting a speed record in the rare book field. These aren't just business successes. They're statements about Rebecca's values and priorities. Her consulting work now focuses specifically on getting overlooked and marginalized voices into major institutional collections. In 2024, she helped curate an exhibit that spotlighted 18th century Black writers whose work had been ignored by mainstream literary history. Her team in Silver Spring, Maryland, now includes 10 full-time employees. If her consulting model continues to succeed at its current pace, it could bring in $2 million per year through museum partnerships alone, while simultaneously changing how major institutions think about whose voices deserve to be preserved and celebrated. So what's the real truth about Rebecca Romney's disappearance from Pawn Stars? The honest answer is that we may never know the complete story. Was it really just career advancement and a natural progression away from reality TV? Was it connected to the FBI investigation and the stolen Book of Mormon scandal? Or was it something else entirely that we haven't even considered? What we do know is that Rebecca has built something far more impressive and lasting than reality TV fame ever could have given her. She's become a respected voice in academic circles, a successful entrepreneur, a champion for forgotten women writers, and a pioneer in using technology to authenticate historical artifacts. She's gone from being the book lady on a reality show to being one of the most influential people in the rare book world. She's collecting and preserving voices that would otherwise be lost forever. She's teaching the next generation of rare book experts to think beyond just profit and market value. And she's using cutting-edge technology to make sure that future generations will be able to access and study these incredible pieces of human history. Maybe Rebecca's disappearance from Pawn Stars wasn't a mystery or a scandal at all. Maybe it was just a brilliant woman realizing that she had outgrown reality television and was ready to do something much more meaningful with her expertise and passion. Whatever the real truth is, one thing is certain. Rebecca Romney's story is far from over. She's writing new chapters every day, uncovering forgotten voices, and making sure that the stories that matter most don't disappear into the darkness of history. If this story fascinated you as much as it fascinated me, please hit that like button And let me know in the comments what you think really happened behind the scenes at Pawn Stars. Was Rebecca's departure really just about career growth? Or do you think there's more to the story that we haven't uncovered yet? And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because we're always digging deep into the untold stories behind your favorite TV personalities. Trust me, you don't want to miss what we're investigating next.